We're good?
Yes, ready to go.
Great. Welcome then everyone to this Regional Delivery Committee meeting, the first for this triennium. And the major piece of work in this is reporting on the last quarter. So it's a retrospective view of where we have been as a council over time. And then towards the end of our conversation, I will take the opportunity to have a conversation around pressing issues that may be on the minds of councillors, things that might be of interest to us to have officers look at into the future if we can. So when we come to questions, I would ask that they are or will be relevant to the reports that we are talking about, as there will be an opportunity for more general questions later in the meeting to progress some of those thoughts. So welcome again. We had a Karakia at the opening of play, so we have that. I have one apology, that of Joe Davies, who is travelling. He suspected he would not be able to get connectivity wherever he is in Eastern Europe. And we have no conflicts of interest, no public forums, deputations or petitions, and I am not aware of any extraordinary or urgent business, and no one raised a hand, and equally no notices of motion. So that takes us to agenda item 7.1, Core Services Performance Report, Quarter 2. And I'd ask Amy Adams, Alison, too many Amy's, too many A's, used to my old roles in life. Amy Allison to the table. Amy's. It'll go on replay. Yeah, it will. And Grant. So, Amy, you have some opening comments, thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. And morena councillors, for those joining us on live stream, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Amy Allison ahau, kei te rautaki rangatira, ahau mani e mahi ana nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings, everyone. We are, as you've already said, we are here to run you through our Core Services Performance Report at the end of Quarter 2. So, covering our performance from 1 July to 31 December 2025. The purpose of this report is to provide assurance to the councillor and to ratepayers that the core services are being effectively delivered as per the service measures, work programs and budgets agreed in the annual plan for 2025-2026. As we've discussed, largely retrospective. There is some forward-looking commentary in there, but it was at that point in time. And as also previously discussed, we're looking at the phasing of the reports and when the reforecast is done. There's quite a lag, and it's a balance between whether the performance information is then old or the finance information is not up to date. But we are looking we are looking at that timing. We're also looking at whether there is another opportunity within these processes to discuss finances from a governance perspective, real time, but noted that comments. Grant will introduce himself, will briefly comment on the overall service performance and financial performance. We are taking the report as read, and then that will be followed by more in-depth conversations for each of the core services. So thinking about your questions, we will take when they come. We're here to serve, but please do know that from the initial conversation, there will be more in-depth conversations, one per core service. The public service, forget where I am, public transport core service will be first, followed by the environmental regulation and protection, and finally the community preparedness and response to hazards. We have, as you can see, we have key staff in the room, and we have also done our best to think about the questions that you may ask. It may be that if it's specific detail, we will get back to you, but we've done our best to make sure that your answers can be responded to with sufficient quality today in the room. So I'll just run you through an overview of the service measure performance, and then I'll hand over to Grant for the financial. So at the end of quarter two, 2025-26, there are 36 service measures, and 34 of them will be reported on this year that are on track and will be achieved at year end. There are 2 that we are thinking at this stage will not be achieved. One, for service measure 1, as a result of legislation, it is not within our powers to deliver on that, and that is due to a legislative change that relates to work notifying the regional policy statement. So that is outside of our control, but it is in our annual plan, so we are honour bound to report. For service measure 2, that is also at this stage will not be, we can say now, will not be achieved. That has a new target for 95% of all processing of resource applications within statutory timeframes. We note that this measure in this year went up. The measure that we were reporting against went up significantly from 50% to 95%, which has almost doubled. That said, we took up the challenge to lift our performance and deliver, and but despite the improvements, currently it's only 79%, which is a significant increase from 50%, but that is not the measure that we are being measured on for this year. We can say that 90% of all consents lodged since the 1st of January met the statutory timeframe, so there is an upward trajectory in our performance. Also of note, service measures 19B and 19C are now included in the quarterly report. These relate to major flood protection and control works that are maintained, repaired and renewed. This work was being undertaken and but relates to being more clear about how we are meeting the required reporting from Department of Internal Affairs, so which applies to all regional councils and unitary councils. The change for this, just reminding, we've had many conversations in the chamber. This particular issue, we had a set of measures that were agreed and reviewed by this council and also by Audit New Zealand as being sufficient. However, through the review at the end of the first annual plan and relating to a re-review or and also a change in staff, Audit New Zealand gave us the feedback that while they were initially sufficient, their view was now that they were not. So it's not that the work hasn't been done, it was actually just tweaking the re-clarifying those service measures. So they are now in the report and we have and they are there for your reading. To note, finally, related to the service measures, service measure 4, 18, 28 and 34, their measurement all relates to surveys or audits and the process for those, so we can report to you in a way which meets Audit New Zealand requirement, i.e. repeatable by a third party. Those surveys or audits are planned for later in the year, so the data is not available. So it's not that we're not doing the work or we're monitoring internally, it is to meet the bar set by Audit New Zealand for measurement to give you the level of assurance that you require. So we're onto it, but we will report back. The final thing I'll say is that yes, we do. We have service performance measures, and we also have outcomes. Just reminding you that service measures are generally the definition of a service measure. It is a measure of things that are directly within our control. Outcomes are something that we contribute to. So they are by definition something that we can attribute our effort, but it is a collection of other people's efforts. We are not entirely responsible for that. However, we tag our work to those measures. What I'm trying to say is that those are not generally reported on in a quarterly way. They are the general practice is that they are yearly. So again, and the types of measures don't always include. We rely on measures by other agencies. So they are more difficult, and that is why that they are not included in a quarterly report. That said, they are online, and those that we're adding information all the time. And please do look on our website for how we're going against those outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Grant.
Kia ora koutou, ko Grant Ingoa, and I'm the General Manager of Finance and Assurance. So I'll give you my overview here, and it does tie to some of those questions that were asked earlier in the day around Q2 versus forecast. So at the end of December, we have a surplus of 11.4 million, which is a variance of 10.5 against budget, and an underspend of 12.4 million, which is about 7.6% of our spend at that sort of level. Following the publishing of the Q2 result, our latest forecast to year-end, based on that Q2 position, is now available. It's been done. So it indicates an $8 million surplus, which is a small change from the 7.3 million surplus that I mentioned last time around. And that's against the annual planned deficit of 3.7 we've had. The underspend itself has risen to 15 million in the latest forecast. So that's a rise of about 4 to 5 million. And there's a flip side to that in the revenue too, because our expenditure drives revenue in a lot of cases. So you get the balancing out, thus the surplus offsetting. At 4.2% with that underspend, it actually represents a lower percentage level of underspend when considering the full year's budget. So that 7% starts to come down to 4% when the full year's considered. So I guess that's a positive move forward for ECAN. In terms of what it's made up of, it's made up of a few factors, and something I'm really focused on now is what are our fixed variances, those that we can't do much about, versus those variable ones that we can in terms of work delivery. So the first ones are more the fixed variances. So, for example, planning work being on hold, contract payments less than budget, and project deferrals for public transport. They're quite big numbers and they tend to be fixed variances. And lastly, which is more of a good news story, is around digital solutions savings driven by efficiencies and centralisation initiatives. That's quite wordy, but generally that's about saving money on licence fees, external support savings, and system upgrade efficiencies. All of those things help to reduce our costs, and we're going to need to do more of that with the environment coming in. In terms of the other variances, well, that's down to timing delays, the ones that we can actually do something about within the financial year. So, for example, weather-related delays in terms of planned river works. Also, our vacancy level, that's always a point for discussion. And the vacancy savings position above that budgeted was around 2.1 million per the last forecast. And I'm pleased to say that has dropped back in the latest forecast to about 900k above budget. And it shows that our recruitment has picked up following, I guess, the holiday period coming in with Christmas, moving into the new year where we gear up again and we get that those vacancies filled and moving. So there is a bit of contraction there that I'm seeing. And while we expect work in timing related areas to move closer to budget, we ultimately expect an underspend by year end. That's a fact. That's going to happen. But looking ahead, I'm thinking about the next few years, and I'm thinking about increasing cost pressures, OPEX, CAPEX on our asset base, and what's happening there. I'm also thinking about the external environment and the pressure that may put on ratepayers, all in an economy that's turning. We're hearing that it's turning, and it may go a bit more inflationary as well in time, per the presentation we had from Brad the other day, Brad Olson, talking about inflation creeping back in and needing to be controlled. And all of this is after a long and protracted downturn. So the message is, look, the economy is going to change. Now's the time to gear up and prepare for this change, let alone all the reform ahead of us. So given this, we're actually proposing or suggesting that any surplus goes back into reserves, unless otherwise directed by council. And that's my summary for today.
Thank you, Grant. I know there'll be some questions. I have one from Genevieve in a second. Could you just clarify, I guess, your surplus conversation initially at 11.4% and where we are sitting at the moment, and that is to the end of December, which is halfway.
Just to clarify, the Q2 results are to the end of December last year, and the forecast is to the end of June this year.
So the forecast of surplus is to the end of June.
Yes. So what we're doing now is we're saying here's our historical information, but let's look ahead and think about what's coming financially as well.
And those services that we will not provide feeding through. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Genevieve, you had a question?
No, thanks for that, and I really appreciate your narrative there too, looking at the future concerns that have been highlighted and everything too. And I think we really need to embed that in future reports, at least some commentary within the report as well. That's just my view. So with regards to some of the things we have or couldn't achieve, I see that the Regional Coastal Environment Plan's not on there as a paused item. And I believe it was paused, and I'm wondering why that isn't on there as a non-achieved issue, because I think in August it was paused, and this is up until the end of December. Is there a reason it's not on there as not been developed as it could be or should be? That's part one.
Part one. It's not specifically. Certainly, we can note it for the next time, and I take your point because of the plan stop arrangements and regarding your notice of motion. We would contend that we are still doing that work of the overall review, but we haven't been able to actively change the plan because of plan stop. So I think it's the work and the review work, and we've had previous briefings on this as well. I think it's just the nuance of the report. So we can fix that for next time. But the approach that I had taken is that we are still doing the review, and it will be as part of the integrated plan. But I take your point on that technicality.
No, thanks for that. It's just that, like the RPS and such are sort of relayed through it. It'd be good to not lose traction on at least discussing it through some audit measure like this. So thank you for that. I guess I have concerns with, there's a really strong sort of green light sort of system happening, and which is really good to see. but I'm not sure that I feel comfortable with seeing outcomes coming from those green lights. We're achieving service measures, but how is that being relayed into what we're seeing on the ground? So on face value, I think the report looks healthy, but the narrative behind it is not forthcoming to me enough that I feel that the risk going forward isn't either greater or, and as a sort of an audit sort of perspective, I guess, I'm not seeing enough of a trajectory from it to make me feel comfortable going forward without addressing some of the unidentified things within this report. So how do I make that a question? I don't know. But I feel like there's enforcement outcomes that aren't resolved. We might have compliance and monitoring, but how are these being resolved as real-world issues? It might be Brett that has to answer. I don't know, but it's more than just financial reporting. That's what I'm trying to say. It's an outcomes report that we need to be able to reflect on and get information from going forward.
Just to clarify question through the chair. This is the link between our outputs and our outcomes. Is this where you're driving to? Yeah.
Yeah, we do, because we can have a green dot. We can have a service achievement, I guess, but how's that delivery looking going forward?
This may be a part A, part B answer, because I can certainly answer on behalf of the report and the service measures and the narrative, and then if it's a specific example to do with consent or compliance, for example, I have my learned colleague here with me. So I think in terms of the report, this report, and at this as governors and at this level, it is correct in terms of if we are answering against a service measure, be it consents, compliance, or anything else, any of our 36. The green lights and the tracking against those measures is on track, because in terms of how we measure those things, and I've already talked, haven't I, about how we measure those things and the level of specificity required to be repeated by a third party, and there's a bunch of other things that Audit New Zealand hold us to. And also that the overarching outcomes, while we're projecting positively forward, again they have measures, and they will be at the end of the year. I think what you're though, Councillor, if I may, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, I think what you're pointing to though is not outcomes or a service measure or a lecture against how the reporting framework works. You're more interested on what's happening on the ground and the impact that it's having, and getting a richer feel for how that's going. I think that's...
Well, for me, a service measure is not just, I guess, the program itself, it's the performance of that program, and how sitting here today, knowing that we know this week or the week before, in relation to that quarter, how do we perform our jobs better with less going forward? As a hindsight document, it needs a trajectory going forward of how to implement. I'm not against the report. I think it's well done and everything, but I guess it could have more substance to it that could actually say to us, going forward, this is a risk we've seen, or rather than that's just what I can see. And as I mentioned earlier, the seminar we had yesterday highlighted that we should actually be seeing these horizons outlooks and these type of reporting as an audit function, so we don't have to keep looking in retrospect at, oh, shivers, we didn't do that, we should have done this. I want to see that in there.
Can I just make a comment in there? I agree with your thoughts and thinking, but I'm not sure it's appropriate for a conversation here looking at this report. And it's something I would like to have a conversation with either at the end of today or take it away and come back. So the difference in my mind is we have dare I say it, a bunch of boxes that we tick. And then there are the outcomes that people see on the ground and the connection between the boxes we tick and what we see on the ground. Today, it's about the boxes that we tick. The wider conversation is the outcomes. And I think that's a conversation that we should have on a further date. How do we ensure that the boxes that are ticked are achieving the outcomes on the ground? And so that sums up what you're thinking. I think it's a wider conversation than just one today. I don't know if you have a thought, Brett, at all, or...
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I would say absolutely take your point about how these reports are they are improving over time. We are also at the moment going through developing the risks profiles for each of the core services with the view to have those also in a future report, and there are a bunch of other things for improvement. So I take your point. These, I would say that this report is till December, and it is actually, in terms of accountability against the money that we have spent, it is still, yes, it is a box tick, but it is still a very important part of our requirements under the Act. So always can do better, and that will absolutely be done in the future.
Thanks, Amy. I have a bunch of questions, and we've already spent half an hour before we've got to the core services. So, yes, it's a great conversation. The next question is from Peter, followed by Megan. So a succinct question and a succinct answer would be useful.
Sorry, Chair, that's not going to happen, actually. But in terms of regional delivery, I'm reasonably happy with where we're at with this and the levels of service. And we did set the budget, we did set the annual plan, the long-term plan, and we're just reporting about that. I guess my concern, Grant, is going forward is that our 4+4, 8+4 process that we use to track where we're at, along with the comment that I mentioned earlier, we expect there will be continue to be significant budget variance and coming up to an annual plan. I mean, is there a better way, or is there another way to strategically understand where that money is? Because, as I said, we rate it and it keeps coming, and if we're not going to spend it, changes here. There's changes going to do that to us.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Scott, and I think for me it's being mindful of our revenue as it's coming in and how it's linked to different types of reserves, and that it's flowing back to where it should flow back to in order to be reused at a time when we can actually use it, So
yeah, no, that's great, and huge amount of faith in what you're doing, actually. It's just about the inquiry around where we're headed, and some of us don't know, none of us know that really. So the other question that I want to ask is about the pest management metrics that we use. So are we able to do that, John, here, or is that relevant? It's in the things. So yeah, so 11, 10, 11, both those. So one specifically about the pest within the pest management stuff, which is the wallabies. So whether the metrics are in the containment area, or is it the national program that we're actually looking at in terms of those reporting those numbers?
Is that a question for now or into?
Well, we can do it later. And the other one is there a metric for wild and conifers? Because the point that we made, and the point we should keep in front of people all the time, is there's a compounding effect if we don't get ahead of this, which is 30% a year. So if we haven't spent the money, in 4 years' time, we'll need to spend 140 million rather than 20 million a year, that sort of thing.
Councillor Mackay will answer that in ERP. Megan has a question, followed by Ashley.
Kia ora. So first as a comment, second as a question, it's on finance, but the comment is today you provided me with a light bulb moment when you clearly said that the service measures are those that are directly under our control and outcome measures are the collective responsibility, including other agencies. And that was so helpful for me to understand. And so I wanted to thank you for that. And when we are moving through to that risk profile, if we are going to take service measures and into how that goes into the outcome measure and what the risks are, then that actually means that we're assessing risk of other entities as well, which is quite helpful because it will impact on our business and how we operate. So thank you. That really was helpful. Now, my question is about finance, and thanks for indicating that we're tracking towards an underspend of about $8 million when we come up to the end of this financial year. It was $8 million, wasn't it, and 4% variance?
The 8 million is the surplus, yeah, as opposed to the underspend. Yeah.
The wrong word, I meant surplus. Because then my question is, we've kind of been operating in a surplus model for some time now, and looking forward, we're going to have a different future. If we're moving into rates capping, and if we've got annual plan, we're really trying to, there was an indication in the long-term plan that this would be a 7.7% rates increase year, and we're really trying to pull that back to a 2.9 or as best as we can to a reduced value. And as we're moving forward into a different future, I just wanted to know, what are we doing right now to get ready for that future? And is there going to require a shift in finance culture within the entity? And how do we as governors support that finance shift?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and that is what needs to evolve, I think, in the organisation. So at the moment we have a surplus situation and an underspend situation. I think with a rates cap environment coming in, we need to think about possibly moving to Project Save a bit more actively, and how can we reduce costs across the organisation. And so digital is already a great example of that. You know, we've saved $1.7 million there, which is a great number, but it can get intertwined with the underspend and make us look like we're not spending our money. Well, in fact, that's quite a different thing, isn't it? And so how do we do more of that? And that's something I think we need to build up through governance and management to drive it.
Thanks, Grant. Claire, did you have a question?
If I may add to that, to your point of changing our culture, I do think that is beginning. So we have just kicked off a whole of organisation business planning process to ensure that business planning is under. We all do it, but consistently, and so we can have greater analysis and oversight. There's a lot of work going on that Taflin is leading to ensure we've got greater visibility across projects and resources. And then for the annual plan, and these are just examples, for the annual plan, each director and each budget holder met with finance and reviewed their current expenditure profile and also past behaviour. So that is underway. We may not be as explicit about it as we should be, and we are absolutely building on that culture.
Thanks, Amy. Claire, did you have a question? You did? No? John Faulkner, followed by Nettles.
Thank you for that. There will be one part is a question on setting the service measure protocols and how they get populated, and that might be answered at a later point, because there was the statement made under the direct control, and and I look at where the Canterbury water management strategy sat previously, and really the only mention we've got here is in 18 on local action support. So there's two questions. One, how much of the savings have come out of the Canterbury water management strategy budget, if any, that are in that surplus, and that how we set the protocols, because you can make a dead dog look pretty good if you ask the right questions. And I'm just concerned a little bit about perhaps we're not asking a lot of the more in-depth questions, but that's a conversation for later, and it sort of refers to what Genevieve was talking about as well. Oh, sorry, and there was one other. In 2012, the number of inland wetlands physically assessed, it was said there was 55, and then 7 assessments have been completed. I don't quite understand.
Can we just keep some of those questions to the relevant core services where we might get a better answer than a generic answer at the table at this point?
Could I just address the financial question, though, with the Canterbury Water Management? We don't have that figure in terms of the savings at the moment. We'd have to come back to you on that, and I'm not sure that someone else will be able to, but here we go.
Kia ora koutou, and through you, Chair. So for the CWMS strategy, this year we're forecasting underspend of $200,000, and that's associated with no payments, honoraria payments to community members or to Runanga in this financial year, or far less of them. So originally there's $220,000 budgeted for that, but with the disestablishment of zone committees, and as we're still working to establish local leadership groups, there is a forecast $200,000 underspend.
Thank you, Cam. I have one more question from Nettles, and then we will move on to the first core service.
Thank you. So, Grant, you're feeling buoyant. Is that right? You would say?
I would say I'm not feeling buoyant. I'm feeling cautious, and I'm looking out, and I'm thinking about the future and how we best prepare ourselves for it.
The question to come. You talked about the variances in digital solutions and other savings, sort of giving a trajectory, heading in the right direction of sort of underspend and surplus and subsequent ability, to accrue. So what I'm digging down to understand that the good news isn't an accidental false economy, and it is a trajectory that with the forecasting and looking deeper into what's coming, that it is a trend that is not serendipitous, that is absolutely being worked on and expected. You were expected to see it rather than going, phew, that happened. What I don't want to see is, I know with the best will in the world, we're all working to spend less and get more for what we have. Wanting to know how granularly you're looking at that, and how purposefully we're seeing those results that are expected from the changes.
Yes, I see what you're saying, for sure. And in the case of digital, it's very much by design. So our GM Digital has been very determined and forthright with his approach, and it's very deliberate. But I think we can look to that as a really good example and look to do more of it. Even by way of example, without naming names, had a CA firm the other day wanting to charge 5% as a technology cost on top of a proposal. And we just need to ask the question, why is that? Should you not pay for your own technology rather than council, for example, or the ratepayer? And so these are the sort of challenges and the things we can do to tighten up. That's what I'm keen to do, yeah.
If I could add, so that is one example. I think we have lots of humans in this organisation, and as an ELT, we're looking to create the culture of a continuous improvement and always doing more for less. But a good one swallow doesn't make a summer. So good to highlight what's going well, but we've always got more work to do.
Thank you, Amy and Grant. Are you staying at the table, Amy, or stepping back? You're stepping back, and Grant, thank you for the summary of the report, and I invite Stuart Gibbon to the table in the absence of Joe Davies, who is an apology travelling somewhere. Stuart is going to introduce the report on public transport and answer questions. Stuart and Giles.
Kia ora koutou, Council. I'm just going to run through a sort of summary of the core service report and then open to questions. In terms of the highlights for the year to date, and in particular through to quarter two, as Council is aware, we launched our national ticketing motor move service in that quarter, with CPC payments now available for across our network. We've also introduced pets on buses, which has been successfully received. Something I'm particularly excited about is Route 7. Earlier in the year, we implemented a service uplift on Route 7, and for the first half of the year, we've seen a 7% increase in patronage on that route. So it's really, really encouraging, supporting the investment there. We also introduced a new trial in Rolleston with a commercial operator called Bentley. And that's kind of as Council is aware, a first of its kind, combining a private and public funded service together to provide more capacity for that community. We'll be starting a review of that trial at the end of this month and through March, and be coming back to Council with some advice on how to proceed with that in the future. And also what's useful to understand, year to date, our private revenue target is above what we set. It's just over 16%. Our target was 13%. I would caveat that with the second half of this year, we have a higher spend rate coming up, and so that will attenuate that private revenue number downwards a little bit. In terms of service measures, you can see on the report that we are tracking well with our service measures. As Amy mentioned, service measures 28 and 34 are annual customer surveys, and those surveys take place in Q3, so we won't have those results until the end of the fiscal year. From a financial performance perspective, Grant mentioned a few of the highlights there. In terms of expenditure, we are underspent to the tune of circa $4.7 million, and there are several factors influencing this. The NZTA index, which is an inflationary allocation to public transport, was lower than budgeted, so that was good. We were underspent on some of our projects while we resource up in the first half of this year, in particular the network service review, supporting PD Futures. Council is going to hear a lot about that later this month with a briefing coming up. So now that we've resourced up in the first half of the year, we're able to commence the detailed work on that project, so our spend rate on that will go up. And the other one would be optimisation. So again, we've needed to recruit resources in the first half of this year, and Council will be having a briefing on that very, very shortly, the first delivery opportunity for optimisation. So you'll be hearing about that soon, and the decisions you make through that briefing and future decision process will influence our spending around the optimisation project coming up. Total mobility, of course, is a key topic nationally at the moment, and you won't be surprised to hear that we're overspent with total mobility. $0.7 million over budget as a whole. Of course, it's useful to note that just under $500,000 of that is funded by NZTA, so our share is not $0.7 million. I just thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about some emerging issues, just thinking about that forward view that you talked about earlier, Genevieve. In December, government announced some changes for total mobility. Two specific things. One is under consultation at the moment around changing the policies around total mobility, who might be eligible, how many trips you can take, etc. And so we will be preparing a submission for that consultation. It's due to be finished in March, and that submission will come to you in early March for your views, and then we will submit it to government. The second change, which was announced, was a reduction in the subsidy rate for public transport commencing on 1 July, so that won't impact this financial year, but it will impact the next financial year. And so the subsidy is reducing from 75% currently down to 65%. And also government has an expectation that councils will reduce the fare cap that we have as well, which will also have an impact on expenditure and consumption rates for total mobility. And we will be coming to you in early March with both of those conversations for you to have a discussion on. The summer is a good time for roadworks, and this summer is no exception. What's different about this summer is there's a lot more of it going on in the city, and that's a good thing. We kind of need our infrastructure maintained and our roads maintained and improved. However, it has a consequence for our service delivery, and we see an increase in impact on the reliability of our service due to delays, particularly at peak times across our network. So you'll probably start to see our reliability figures start to drop a little bit over the next quarter as we deal with that disruption. Also, what we're going to see very shortly in early April is some new small EVs joining our fleet. Timaru is seen as a bit of an innovator in our region, and we are implementing new small EVs in Timaru to service the MyWay service as part of our new contract, which starts in April. So we're pretty excited to see those new vehicles turn up and be put into operation. Secondly, in Q2, we had the arrival of our new double-decker bus, which you'll be aware of, and that's quite an innovative opportunity to try out a vehicle that's weight compliant, but also a double-decker, to try it on our fleet. So we're looking forward to seeing how that performs on our network. Lastly, just talking about the cruise season, that's a topic that we like to discuss on a regular basis. We've had a good start to the cruise season this year. We've had no significant disruptions to our network, which is excellent. We've carried 3,900 passengers across 12 days through to December 2025. And what's also good this season is with Motor Move being available, more of our cruise customers are taking advantage of using their credit cards on our Route 8 service, which has reduced the queues and the wait times for that service as well. So a really good start to the season. I'll stop there and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Stuart, for that overview. We have questions. First, Dion.
Thanks for the update. It's good to hear everything going on PT-wise in our region. The first comment I wanted to make to you is, what summer? We haven't really had one, have we? So I think you need to retract your comments on summer as a good time to have roadworks. Interesting to hear around the PT electric buses in Timaru. I think you might need to go down and see the mayor of Timaru, because he was like, we don't want fancy electrics in our region. They're worried about the weight on the roads, and if you know what's going on with State Highway 1, it'll be good just to alleviate some of the concerns that they have there. The only thing that I really wanted to touch on was the total mobility and the cost that's increasing. I see you've got 9% increase in the growth of the usage. It'd be good to get the actual numbers as well of that usage, because I am concerned when I see the subsidy remains $23.53. Is that our share of the subsidy, or is that the total subsidy?
So the average fare, I think, is $23. Is that what that mentions? Average subsidy rate? Average subsidy? Yeah. So that's the average amount of money that both government and ratepayers contribute to the cost of a customer's trip. Yeah. So in terms of total mobility investment year to date, from an ECAN specific or Canterbury Regional Council specific perspective, in terms of how much of our rates have we spent on total mobility. So through to the end of December, Q1 and Q2, we've spent $2.1 million of ratepayer funds, and that's a targeted rate, as you'll be aware. And we're forecast to spend approximately $4.3 million of rates for total mobility for the year. Our budget was 3.9, so we're going to be overspent by about 9%. That's the forecast at this stage. If we put that into context for the total cost of total mobility for Canterbury, At the moment, the year-to-date spend is $7.9 million. So we have $2.1 million of that. And the rest comes from the Crown via their SURF contribution and then from NZTA through the National Land Transport Fund. We're forecast to spend circa $16 million this year on total mobility, so a significant sum of money. And again, coming back to our contribution of 4.3, so you can see that the majority of that funding is coming out of central government. So we expect to be $1.46 million overspent totally. The changes that I mentioned that are coming, in the first instance, the change to the subsidy rate down from 75 to 65%. We're currently doing a detailed piece of work to understand the implications of that, not only for us and our ratepayers, but also on the customers and their consumption of total mobility. And we'll bring that information to you in March. And then also, if we take into account capping, if we reduce our capping, then more of the trip cost will be borne by the customer, and that will have a corresponding impact on our rates contribution as well. So you'll hear all about that in March.
Thanks for that. I think it would be really useful to get that information back. I just wanted to, with the changes that are going on, is it still going to be an open-ended system? Because that's the bit that I'm struggling with around us budgeting for it in annual plans and subsequent, planning for budgets, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a topical question. So in the consultation process that's underway at the moment, government through Ministry of Transport are seeking feedback on a range of different options that they're proposing around trip management. So at the moment, as Council knows, it's a consumption-based model. So the more you can consume as much as you like, as long as you can afford it. So government are considering whether there is merit in moderating that model through, for example, limiting the number of trips that a customer can take that's subsidised, or limiting the types of trips that customers can take that are subsidised. Also, Ministry of Transport are looking at the eligibility criteria and considering changing the eligibility criteria, which would also have an impact on the number of people who can use the service. So really, it's those two things that I mentioned, the total number of trips or the types of trips are being considered, and we have the opportunity to provide some feedback on that, as does everyone else, and then they will make a decision.
Thank you, Stuart. I have a question from Nettles, followed by Ashley.
Thank you. Being a future focused, along with my colleague Megan Mackay, we look with a small smile into the middle distance, one of us being Mona Lisa and one of us being Damien McKenzie, I'm not sure which, but just you mentioned the subsidy in July changing from 75 to 65%. Can you just briefly talk me through the sensitivity analysis that you'll be doing, and so that we can be thinking of the mitigations?
Sure, that's a really, really good question. So as part of our analysis at the moment for what that change will mean for us, we are undertaking some sensitivity analysis to determine where we might position our budget for the coming year based on the likely response from the users of total mobility to a price change. So what we've seen with the subsidy rate going from 50% pre-COVID straight up to 75% during COVID, in the first year we saw a 36% jump in total mobility consumption. And then in subsequent years that has continued to grow at a slower and slower rate. So if we did nothing, we would eventually see the two lines come together where the market had reached an equilibrium of what they can afford and the number of trips they can take. So the sensitivity analysis we're doing is trying to understand how the community might respond to a reduction in price. Unfortunately, there's no elasticity model for total mobility. There is one for public transport, but that's quite a different consumption approach. So we're going to come to you with some sensitivity that is across a range from 5% up to 30% range and steps in between, and we'll recommend a position in that range based on our own sort of knowledge and experience of total mobility services, so that you will be presented with some choices around what level of trip cap you want to apply and what level of trip attenuation you want to punt for in your budget. So we'll be bringing that to you in March.
Thank you. Ashley, followed by Andrea.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is looking at the key achievements. Now, you may have said this before and it may have gone into my brain and got lost. Patronage slightly declined for the quarter. Do we know why patronage declined for the quarter?
Yes, so year to date, July through to December, we're running at around about 2.9% patronage decline from the previous year. The main driver for that decline is the change in our fare structure. And the main contributor to that is the tertiary or the youth category, which is predominantly tertiary students. And I mentioned to council a while ago that that particular cohort in our community saw the largest change in price from $1 to $2.50. And so that group's usage has significantly declined. We've just spent over a week enjoying the fun of O Week at the University of Canterbury with our staff out there encouraging students to opt in for a community services card, because many of the students are eligible for that, and that would give them a $1.50 rate for using public transport, so a much better rate. So it will be interesting to see if that bears any fruit in terms of usage. Yeah.
Okay, and so my other question, I did have others, but you've indicated that you'll be coming to us, so I'll leave them for then. Back to total mobility and the targeted rates. Kind of a multi-part question. Can you explain where the targeted rates are? I'm guessing they're the urban areas. And is there a difference in the targeted rates between the different areas where they're rated?
So total mobility is rates are targeted to those communities that specifically have that service. So, for example, Waimate, Ashburton, Timaru, Geraldine, Greater Christchurch have total mobility services. And so we basically look at the consumption rate over historically. That helps us determine the allocation of the revenue we need to collect, or the rates we need to collect to offset that cost. So that, I think that helps to answer your question.
So just to clarify, the targeted rate may be different in those different areas.
For total mobility, certainly it will be different based on population and consumption rates for total mobility, yes.
Thank you. Question from Andrea, followed by Genevieve.
Just quick questions. For the submission to NZTA about this, you'll come to us to see what we think. Yeah, great. Can we let our customers know there's going to be delays so that we can sort of manage a bit of that reliability problem anywhere in the bus? Because I'm thinking, where I come from, in the bus, there's all these advertisements, things that you're looking at when you're on the bus riding that would say, A, there's delays this month, or B, can we do advertising to help subsidize? Do our buses have those panels? I haven't noticed.
So at the moment, inside the bus, we don't have any advertising. For our electric buses, we have the LCD screens inside the buses, so we can put some messages on there. When we have known detours on our network. We notify our community and our users through their social media and on our website of detours for particular routes. But where there's roadworks and no detours, then we're kind of at the whim of what the traffic's doing that day. So Centaurus Road would be a good example where there's quite a few segments of roadworks. The Orbiter in particular has 6 locations of roadworks on its southern part. I didn't count the northern part. So that has significant disruption on it at the moment. But as I say, look, roadworks are essential. Infrastructure maintenance is essential. We can't argue against that. It's just that summer's the time. Well, when we're in this part of the season, as opposed to being summer, that's when they like to do it.
At least in a bus, you can go on your phone.
Thank you. I was hoping to draw it to a close, but I now have 4 more questions. So Nick, followed by Sarah, Megan and Genevieve, and then we will draw to a close and move on. So Nick Moody, quick question.
Yeah. Can you just spell out what total mobility is and who uses it? I mean, I've read it in the thing, but it's kind of very politically correct and, not necessarily clear.
Sure. So perhaps it's easier if I talk about the current criteria for using total mobility. So total mobility is a national construct created by government, administered by public transport authorities to enable those folk who can't use public transport to still be able to engage with the community and society. So the 5 criteria at the moment are: can you walk to the bus stop? Can you get on the bus physically? Can you engage with the driver and pay your fare? Can you get off the bus safely? And can you walk to your destination? So if you have challenges or inabilities to do any one of those 5 things consistently or reliably, then you're eligible for total mobility. So that opens total mobility up to quite a wide range of our community. So we have people who are elderly, people who are disabled, people who are injured, use total mobility for a short period of time. People who have challenges mentally or psychologically engaging with people are eligible for total mobility. So quite a wide range of the community can use that service.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Peak times express buses from suburbs, like say from Sumner, Harewood, Brighton, whatever. Has that been explored as far as... thank you.
So at the moment, our peak express or direct services predominantly are focused on Selwyn and Waimakariri and Lincoln, Darfield, of course, as well. We used to have a direct or express bus that ran from Sumner through to Ferrymead and then straight to town. That was disestablished as part of the rationalisation post-earthquake. And so we find ourselves in a bit of a limbo situation at the moment where we have lots of ideas and for improving our service, but at this stage we don't have the funding from central government to do it. And you'll hear a lot about that in the next few weeks when we bring to you a briefing on PT Futures and on the optimisation work where we see opportunity, but in order to get government share of the funding, we need to produce an investment case, and that's the work that we're about to start now. But also in the optimisation space, council have 100% funded a bucket of money to use for opportunities like you're talking about. So we're going to bring our first opportunity to you, and I think it's next week, maybe it's this week. Anyway, it's very, very soon. But of course that comes with trade-offs, and we'll be talking about that with you as well.
Thank you. The list keeps getting longer. Megan.
I'll be quick.
Thank you.
Total mobility submission. So the changes were announced on 16th of December, and I think I've been somewhat distracted by RMA and haven't turned my mind to this. And the 22nd of March is coming up really quickly. And what's being proposed is a 10% decrease in subsidy and dropping of the fee cap, but offset by strengthening measures, which I haven't looked at. And I'm just going to ask a question, which is travel of direction. Given that the 22nd of March is coming up really quickly, do you have a general feel of whether this will be a minor, medium or substantial impact on the delivery of our total mobility services?
Well, that's a good question. Two parts to my answer. In terms of the funding side, I think that's going to have a moderate impact on total mobility consumption. It's a 10% reduction in the level of subsidy and a 10% reduction or more if council chooses in the capping. But most of our total mobility trips are under our cap at the moment. So today, 6.7% of our trips are over our $70 cap. So the capping adjustment is going to have a minor change. The 10% change to 65% will have a moderate impact in our view. In terms of the criteria and the policy settings, it depends on where government lands on the continuum of either being quite restrictive or not. If they're quite restrictive, that will have a significant impact, not only on the eligibility criteria, but also the consumption and the choices that those members of our community may make for travel. If they choose to stay at the other end of that continuum with minor adjustments, then I think those people who, let me think about how I word this, those people who are most need the service will still be able to get the service. Yeah.
Thank you. Genevieve, a quick question.
Very quick.
Oxymoron.
I just want to make one quick comment first. Emerging issues, very important, and that actually gave us a perspective, enabling Megan's question looking forward. So thank you for that. Just quickly, are we measuring our emissions in our fleet?
Yes. So we do two things. We report to council the number of percentage of kilometres travelled on our fleet by our EV buses, and so that's a percentage of total kilometres, and we are constantly looking to fine-tune where those buses operate to maximise their usage. Of course, as council is aware, that has consequences because the buses are heavier, and in some parts of our city, the roading network and the substrate is not really suitable for heavy bus, so we get vibration. And we also know at a scientific level the nature of emissions from our diesel buses, and so we can calculate based on the kilometres they travel and their engine type what typically the emission footprint of our fleet would be, and we do that as well.
Everyone does that.
Thank you. Chairman Swiggs pushed his way in for a
I did
quick
push my way in.
question.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, sir. You mentioned around the, sorry, I forgot to say this before, the PT Futures Network Review, and I understand there's a different name for it now. Why was it delayed from 2025 to starting sometime soon? You mentioned it, but I don't know why.
Yeah, the reason for the delay is resourcing. So some of the councillors who've been here previously will understand that we've had a significant shortfall in capacity in the public transport team. So for the first half of this year, we've been very, very focused on recruitment. We've recruited 10 specialist resources in our team up until Christmas, and that ranges from project resources through to specialist planning and scheduling resources to help us with this project. And so now we've got the necessary skill sets to do the work, and that's why it's starting now. We're also got a few other roles to recruit the second half of the year to fully have a complemented team.
Thank you. And last question, Deputy Chair Cranwell.
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, Stuart. Good to see you survived the ride over to Wainui, so it's kia ora. Of course, talking about the best bus number 7, you see you got 7% growth. in a sense, was that your figure you were looking at, or was you kind of expecting above or below that?
We would expect a long run growth of more than 7%. I can tell you that if we counted January, we're at 9%. So the growth is continuing to go at the moment, and so we're quietly encouraged by that. Yep.
Thank you, Stuart, and your advisor, who looks very suntanned. So, yeah, thank you for that presentation. We now move to ERP, and I would invite Councillor Mackay to provide introductions and for the team to come to the table, please. And I just point out again, we are discussing in retrospect, yes, some forward focus, which I hoped would be later in the meeting. So when we get to questions and the like, can we just again think about what we are asking about and have a future conversation towards the end, just to try and speed things up a little bit. Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. I've had to tweak my notes given the presentation that was started off by Amy. But look, the paper does report on the delivery of the operational side of our regulatory role, managing the use of our natural resources. So that's really the implementing the rules via our consents, compliance with our rules, and also the support and guidance that the organisation provides to meet community aspirations and the national requirements in the land, water and air space, for example. And as was mentioned earlier, of course, many others are also involved in or have key roles in driving the outcomes that we seek. So I think we just need to acknowledge the work that they do too. I guess I'm not really telling councillors that sit around the table anything here or staff in this building, but I think one of the most telling paragraphs in today's report relates to the context in which the essential work of the organisation, or particularly this core service, has continued against the backdrop of big regulatory change, really, particularly with the enacted changes in the resource management systems that have occurred, and how they've clearly impacted the delivery of some of our planning, consenting and our compliance functions. And we know that more changes are expected depending on the outcome of the bills, if they become acts and what they look like, and the devil will be in the detail there. And I think that it's really important that this core service is prepared as best it can to be agile and responsive to the future. The paper on page 6 of 29, so that's the separate agenda that you got, definitely outlines the key achievements, and I just really want to thank all those that have driven those outcomes, and that's once again both within and outside the organisation. So I'm not going to repeat them, take the paper as read, but I think there's a couple of areas I think that are worthy of highlighting, and one is the leadership group that the CE set up to strengthen our approaches to nitrates in drinking water. That certainly has been an issue that's been at the previous term of council. And I know there is a briefing coming after this meeting for councillors on that. And I guess the other one is the Smart and Enabling Regulator program. And I'm, as a returning councillor, and those of us that are returning, it's really, there's been a lot of work and a lot of investment, millions of dollars invested in this since 2023, mid to late 2023, to try and get rid of all the legacy consents. And when we had a program in place for all those legacy consent applications in the end of 24, I think there was certainly some optimism that we would have them all cleared up long before now. So there is still that hangover, and it is impacting some of our key figures that we want to, or key targets that we're trying to achieve. And they are addressed in the report, and we've already had a little bit of an overview from staff around them. So I understand that staff are currently have got a program that's undertaking a review of those deliverables within that Smart Enabling Regulator program, particularly in the light of the legislative change and impending legislative change that have been indicated. And a further briefing will be coming to us in March or April, is what I'm aware of. I won't dwell on the service measure performance. Amy highlighted the two measures that are not on track of our 18 and the ERP core service. Won't dwell on them, but just would like to probably provide a little bit of background around the not meeting service measure 2 of the 95% target. We actually started off from a very, very low base and 26%, I think, if my memory serves me correct. I'm getting a nod. And then last year, obviously, the target was 50. I think we were slightly over that. And then put quite an aspirational target in for 95%. So I will acknowledge that applications been received since January 25 are above 90%, but even given that, we're still a little bit of catching up to do. So thank you for continuing to work out what has become a little bit more of a drawn-out process than we thought to get rid of those legacy consents. Financial performance, that's been mentioned, and certainly the questions I think that we all want to know is the forecast and where we're going to finish up the end of the year. But the report does outline for environmental regulation and protection that we have a 5.6 million less than budgeted expenditure, and the revenue was 2.7% less than budgeted. And I guess, we've picked up on the fact that the RMA planning work has led to a significant underspend of 2.7 million, and then the legislative changes around your consenting and compliance have both been affected, particularly from the user pays perspective. And then also there was a contribution in this around where staff have chosen, and I think it's a very smart move, to align the application processes for the 3 concessible funds that we have. So there's just been a delay there in the budgeting. So notwithstanding the update from Grant on the forecast budget, and I think that it would be nice to be either change our timing or at least have a verbal space to bring us up to date. I mean, there are a couple of key issues to keep a watch on in the next financial year, and the end of year budgeted positions, and they do relate to the 25-26 anticipated cost recovery from consent services at 60, and we had in the target of 64%, and we're running at 62%, and staff have already indicated that we're unlikely to meet that target, but mainly because of the reduced resource consents that have come in, changing from legislation. And also, as was noted, the compliance service revenue is 1 million behind budget, associated with our program around compliance risk on going to a more risk-based regulatory activity, but that's equally offset. Not equally offset, but it is offset to a degree by lower expenditure. So part of our long-term plan discussions will be how we should fund RMA regulatory services in a way that actually align with that. So that's a piece of work that this council table will have to wrestle with, along with some advice coming from staff. I think lastly, from our emerging issues or an issues that we need, key issue is lately, I don't need to tell anybody this either, that there's been high public interest in cases of odour on both sides of our city, and which we can obviously add to dust concerns, and staff will be bringing back responses to specific resolutions because they are sitting on both regulation, regulation delivery, and the Strategy and Policy Committee. So those papers will be coming back and addressing council's roles in monitoring equality, how we resource that monitoring, and how we respond to those issues. So I'll hand over to...
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Any comments from the team at the table before we go to questions? No questions? Thank you. Questions? We have Ashley, followed by Ian.
Okay, I have several. But they're all related, so I'll throw them all at you together because one may answer the other. They're mostly around the compliance issue, and can you, just for those of us who don't have the background of understanding all this, just tease out that 1 million underspend a wee bit more, just so that I understand why that is. The second, so I'm now looking at page 7, the table on page 7. I have several questions here. Under item 5, you've got percentage of resource users improving their compliance grade in a set of targeted categories. I just want to know what the baselines were there. What did they start at and what's it got to? The percentage of instances of significant non-compliance where we take action. What sort of actions do we take? On number 7, the percentage of reports of elevated environmental harm incidents assessed and assigned within 2 hours of receipt. Are we on track to achieve the same grade or better this year, or are we just going to make above the 75%? Does that all make sense? I can repeat them again if you get lost.
I'll start off with the first one. The 1 million underspend. So when we talk about compliance in this report, we include our land and water teams. So we're not just talking about our compliance and enforcement work. We're talking about our work to take people beyond compliance or get in front of compliance. And some of that underspend is associated with weather and not being able to get work on the ground. And another is across all of those groups, it sort of adds up, but it's minor underspends, minor vacancies that we're just taking time to recruit to. Second one, Jen, I might pass to you if you've got that one.
Kia ora, I just found the right page. So this is service measure 5. And so what we're doing here, this is us transitioning from monitoring at volume and, just ensuring that we recover our costs to monitoring based on risk. And so this is the first time that we've made this transition. So in our previous long-term plan, it was all about have you monitored identified consents. And so all we had to do is monitor them. What we're saying here is we want to demonstrate that our monitoring actually results in a reduction in compliance risk. So the baseline is that number there. So if we're looking, I have it in the report, it's page 9 of the report, not your agenda. And so the targeted categories, so say activities within drinking water protection zones, there were 63 properties in the sample, and then we have the baseline of the compliance status for those 63 properties. All of them will have a higher compliance risk that we're trying to reduce. And so we're benchmarking against what is a small number. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we purposefully identified a small sample. This is certainly not even close to all the monitoring that we do. This is a small sample that we can then demonstrate that we can make very targeted decisions about where we focus our resource to reduce the compliance risk. This is the first year that, so previous long-term plan, the first year 1 of the long-term plan was just setting the baseline and understanding how we can do this, the opportunity for doing compliance different. This year is the first time where we're actually measuring the reduction in compliance risk. So we set the baseline last year, identified these properties, and now we're monitoring to reduce that compliance risk.
Can I just so that I'm clear, 63 properties, they all had a bad score. That bad score differs from property to property. What you're looking for is that in each of those 63 properties, there has been an improvement in score. So it's not an overall baseline, it's an individualised baseline.
When we report it to council, we report a percentage reduction in overall compliance risk. So there may be individual properties where we were not able to resolve, so we're looking at an overall reduction, but still knowing that these are the places that we're focusing to ensure that we're getting a reduction in that compliance risk. You know, so at a simple term, is there a non-compliance? Are we resolving?
I might need to nut that out a bit more, but it's probably...
The only point I want to make is I don't want to report at an individual property level. We need to ensure we're reporting at a high level for properties that are within a community drinking water supply or properties that have that have a simple water take, that we're reporting at that high level rather than at an individual property level.
The next question was on, again, on page 7 of 29, number 6, percentage of instances where significant non-compliance, where we take action. Just again, an indication of what sort of action we're taking would be useful. Yeah.
So anytime there's a non-compliance, we have to develop an action plan. And so that's why in the service measure, we have said that we will do this 100% of the time, because if we're not taking action when there's non-compliance, then we're not doing our job. So what we're saying is we're setting up our systems and processes to ensure that an action plan is in place. All an action plan does is we talk to the customer, the consent holder, about how they're going to resolve the non-compliance, and we document that in our systems with clear timeframes and then hold them to that plan. That's all that service measure is saying, is that we're going to ensure we're identifying non-compliance and resolving it. And so through audit, this was the one that audit focused on at the last audit, that we're putting those action plans in place.
And so the final question was immediately below that. So there, our target is 75% or more, but last year we achieved 82.9%. I'm just wondering, are we tracking to exceed the target and perform similarly again this year, or are we tracking lower than that?
Genevieve.
Yes. I'm not sure if we will go above or below. I think we will definitely meet this target. The issue with some of these is if it's after hours, that's why we don't have 100% response or anything like that, because sometimes this happens after hours and we have guidelines around what we respond to during those after hours, and also just occasionally, capacity in order to achieve. I would say we're going to, at the moment, we're delivering as per normal in every other year.
Thank you.
I just to round off a few things, I would say we're confident we're going to meet it. It is demand driven, so we sort of are at the behest of what happens out there and what comes through, but we're quite confident we can meet it. Whether we're above or below, I'm not sure. I just wanted to round back to Councillor Robinson's question earlier on, which was making the link between our outputs and our outcomes. What you're seeing, I think, in Measure 5 is an attempt to do that. And we're using compliance as a proxy for environmental outcome, that it is well managed. And so we're starting to go, what is our influence on compliance from the work we do? There's some tenuous causal links in there because we do have partners and there's all sorts of other variables that influence that. But this is our foray into that more meaningful reporting.
Thanks. Back to Peter Scott, your initial question around wallabies and wilding pines. Do you wish to ask that again? Wilding pines and wallabies? It's gone? Oh, it's just the appropriate place if you wish to ask. Okay. And you, John Faulkner, you had a question. Wetlands.
Microphone.
Apologies. It was in regards to the categories of non-compliance, and we separated it out into North Canterbury, Central Canterbury, and I just wondered whether there was any pattern happening there, and why, in my mind, North Canterbury is a little bit more underpopulated, but we seem to be overpopulated in the number of incidents.
Sure. So this relates specifically to in North Canterbury. There's 23 properties that we identified where, say, in the south there were only 16 and urban only 9. It is interesting. So, well, this was a point in time where we identified the existing non-compliances that needed to be resolved to include in this in our service measure 5. But if now that we're maturing our understanding of risk, I would say that the northern area is actually showing much less risk than urban and certainly central. And we also know that there's far fewer consents. And so I think that this was an anomaly of a point in time where there were a high number of non-compliances that were requiring resolution. But I can also say that we're starting to change our rural monitoring program because we're doing it based on risk. And so a lot of these are resolving existing dairy effluent discharge non-compliances. So we will resolve those. But we're starting to move more into ensuring farm environment plans are being done properly and water data is being submitted. Dam compliance is being done, fish screens, things like that, the things that are showing us a level of risk in the compliance service.
Just supplementary to that, it's interesting if you talk about dairy effluent non-compliance and Amiri irrigation up there in the basin have got a fairly high number, I can't recall it off the top of my head, number of farms that they audit at A grade. So that means that the dairy effluent has been judged as compliant, but you're giving me the impression that that may not be so.
So there is currently farms that have the requirement for a farm environment plan, and they may be with an irrigation scheme, but they also have the need for a dairy effluent consent on top of that. So what we're doing now with this shift to compliance is looking, rather than individual authorizations of consents, we're looking at a property level. So we're trying to understand the risk of that farming operation rather than the risk of an individual consent, so that we know that we're going to the right place to reduce that to reduce the compliance risk. So but I feel like right now we're in this bit of a transition because we still have to ensure that any identified non-compliances are resolved. And then as we resolve those, we can start to focus our efforts in areas that have the highest risk, meaning those properties that have the highest risk based on multiple factors of FEP audit grades, water data, dams, fish screens, all of those factors to understand where we should actually be on the ground.
Thank you. Ian, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. My question's really more for Claire than the staff, and it really revolves around that. You know, I have a belief that as councillors, we can and should add value to council, and we you know, and in that role we're reflecting community views, public perception, trying to connect the right people together, giving good governance advice and helping sort funding. What worries me in the ERP space is that we don't actually have a informal or actually a proper formal area for discussing outside organised working groups or the strategy committee or this delivery committee. And so my question really for Claire is, why aren't we setting up a working group to facilitate those discussions, or maybe multiple working groups? And as examples, we've got biosecurity, and so the expertise in wallabies, and to a degree Wilding Pines sits with Nick and Peter, but they're not part of a working group to discuss that. We've got biodiversity, and I led a wetlands group in my first triennium when I was a wetlands project on behalf of Landcare Trust, and out of that came recommendations for dealing with rules and regulations around creating wetlands. I know the council is responding because some staff who rang me up and said, "How do you think we're doing?" And I said, "What about?" But you know, I had no, as a councillor, even though I'd led the program, I've got no insight as to what the changes are this council's made to develop that program. And in consents and compliance, well, we know there's a whole lot of issues there, where in fact Ashburton is certainly in the thick of that. But I was also able to put together a service provider and the smart enabling regulator. We've had staff leave this organisation, and so my information is that those relationships have gone into the ether somehow, and we're trying to put them back together again. But again, because we actually haven't got these discussion groups where we might be able to discuss this in a less formal process, it's like you're sort of. I'm worried about trying to do some of the stuff without a more certain process, so that I'm not stepping on people's toes or annoying the staff and asking questions about these things. So I guess my questions to Claire as the core service lead is, why are we resisting putting in working groups for this core service?
I will answer that question and say it's a governance question for a governance conversation with our staff in the room, and it's one that we should pick up. It's not the place for it in this conversation. Next question, Nick Moody. And then you.
Thanks. So the compliance, $1 million underspent, I mean, very disappointing. You know, compliance, obviously, the area we're massively failing on. We need a huge uplift, and you'll hear me advocating that my whole term as long as I'm here. Are you planning to catch up on so that you do more work when we've got those new staff enroll and get through the backlog of compliance work?
I think the answer is yes and no. So some of that underspend will not get back, and some of it's through vacancies. So it's non-spend in labour. The work associated with just delays through weather and other things, we expect to get it back before the end of the financial year. Yeah, yes.
Because obviously when it's raining, that's when you see a lot of problems, and one of the best times to be out there. I know it's hard to get staff out, but that's when you see the erosion, and the big issues. Next question, second.
Just to remind councillors that when we talk about compliance in this report, it's not just the compliance and enforcement work that we do. It's the land and water, on farm, with business, landowner work to get ahead of compliance and not just bring up to compliance. So it's the full spectrum of activities we do around our regulatory work that we're talking about.
Yeah, understood, and a great time for our land management advisors to be out there on farm too, looking at the issues rather than going when it's sunny and everything looks great. Just a query on the next one, page 7. Thinking about the service measures, thinking ahead to our LTP when we might review them, rows 7 and 8. Am I right in thinking that this is this is incident response, which we don't want to be doing. Like, that's already bottom of the cliff, ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. That's when the problems happen. It's so bad that even a member of the public sees it and then they ring up. We want to be doing proactive monitoring, getting out there, finding finding issues and addressing them as staff rather than waiting for the public to identify it, which is going to be very biased to what's visible to the public and not very strategic generally. But so I'm not a big fan, but here it says percentage of reports assessed and assigned within 2 hours or within 24 hours. So that's not actually, no one's actually visited the site. It's just been assigned to an officer. This is the desktop part of it. Am I right in thinking that this number doesn't actually tell us whether we're attending, let alone resolving, and the issues?
I'll start. So yes, I think technically assigned means it's been assigned to an officer for follow-up. My understanding, though, is that it is triaged. So we triage everything that comes through, and we have different response rates based on those triage. And for urgent, we would go straight away. Other stuff, maybe sometime later. Jen, you can probably speak to the detail of it.
Yeah, the intention of that service measure is to ensure that those elevated responses, so things that are a discharge directly to water that's happened, that we're responding promptly. And so you're correct, it is when it's triaged, but for those, there is a expectation that they're responded to because there's a higher risk to the environment. So these two measures are indicating which ones do we need to go out and respond to more promptly than the others, given that we get about 3,000 a year, except for this year.
So we could have a measure in future reports showing how many, of the ones that came in, we went to, that we deemed as important and whether we resolved them, things that would give us more confidence about what's happening on the ground rather than the fact that it's gone through a triage process and it's been assigned to someone, but then what? And
I think that our incident response performance measures could align more to Service Measure 5, where we're actually showing that our response has reduced the compliance risks or prevented. So that's a discussion for the next long-term plan. We did really good changes in measures for compliance monitoring, but I think there probably could be some improvements for our incident response.
Thank you. Claire.
Just I want to thank you, Chair. Just to outline for councillors sitting at the table, RHC, Regulation Hearing Committee, has a dashboard that comes to us regularly, and you're on that, Nick, so you will see that. And previously when we've had a workshop, we've given staff some ideas of what that may look like, so I'm quite sure that that's been taken on board, so they will be refined over time. That doesn't address the option. We don't have an option at the moment to change the service levels, as Jennifer's pointed out, so I think we can encapsulate some of those thoughts. Okay.
Peter Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a recollection about what I was going to ask, so I shall ask it. So the commentary that we have on wild and conifer control on page, whatever it is, 10, doesn't, to me, it's great. Like, it is that we're concentrating in the areas, but the point that I'd like to make here is we do not have a metric how we understand how far we're getting behind every year when we're not funding it properly. And we know that this year was, this financial year was a bit of a disaster in terms of what central government could propose us to have. And I think when Director Hall was here, Stephen Hall was here, we had this number that we used. Every year we don't spend the money, there's a 30% compound cost goes forward. So very, very soon, we might have spent $157 million in the last 5-6 years, but in 3 or 4 years' time, we'll have to spend another $157 million. And that's the consistent message that we need to have. And it's a simplistic message that we need to have. And councillors need to have it in their mind, because when they get an opportunity to talk to MP or whoever, we should keep hammering that. It's one of the things that really, really, apart from public transport and CCOs and things like that, would really get up my nose also. But this is one of the things that get up my nose. We Nick and I were really heavy on it last year until about September, and then we had an election, everyone comes around, and we haven't talked about it. We haven't had a discussion about how far behind we are. And it's not your fault, right? But we need to understand that. Our chair needs to understand that. He's in Wellington every 5 minutes. So he needs to be banging people about that, not about the future for local government, about what our statutory responsibility is, given these councillors are going to be here or whatever. We're still going to have Walling Pines. We're still going to need to do something about it. And just by saying we're going to get rid of regional councils doesn't change that one iota. So that's a bit of a rant. But it'd be good to know what we require and how far we're behind. Now, I don't need that answer now, but I've got a pretty good idea where we wanted to be this year and how far behind we are. So thank you.
If you'd like an answer, Councillor Scott, I can bring Carl Diamond to the table.
I know there's lots of people holding on to questions, all right, and it's very near lunchtime, and we still have a couple of hours' work to do.
Through the chair, because it wasn't a specific question, maybe I can talk a little bit that might give you some confidence in terms of how we do track and report. So we operate under a national governance group when we deliver our program of work, and through that national governance group we're required prior to any financial year to put together a plan in terms of what we are going to deliver, but also outline what we're unable to deliver. That is often kept to the side, and when we're fortunate enough throughout the year at times to obtain alternative funding sources, it is picked up immediately, and that alternative funding is then prioritised to those works we were unable to deliver. So each year we also report on the work we've delivered. We know what we haven't been able to do, and we keep a record of that, and that is maintained and provided to the National Governance Group.
Look, I fully understand that, Carl, and that's not what my rant's about. My rant really is about the fact that I don't really care about Otago. I don't care about Marlborough. I care about what's happening in our area. And having a national strategy doesn't reflect the problem that we have. Having a national strategy through MPI, who take a massive amount of overhead out of that, and we don't kill trees, we don't kill conifers when it's being sucked away. I think the system is a little bit broken in terms of what we are trying to deliver and how we deliver
it. Chair Swiggs, did you have a comment?
No, I just wanted to say absolutely, Councillor Scott, when I do go to Wellington and have those conversations, they are, and it's especially around the functions piece of what regional council does, and the reminding of the everybody that the functions and the work that we need to do needs appropriate funding. Now, I do know that at the regional sector, when we'll have that conversation from a national framework space, we are trying to coordinate pest management so that there is long-term funding within government budgets, similar to what we've done with the Before the Deluge, so that you can start looking at the challenges that we face. And instead of ad hoc funding where you're starting to see, wilding conifers, for example, you've got a whole lot of money comes in, organisations have to gear up, get people, hire them and all that sort of stuff. They do the work and then the money dries away and they have to, spend all of the money on, getting rid of people and scaling down their organisations, and there's a yo-yo. We want to make sure that we can start getting some consistency of funding through the government to partner with regional or whoever does the work so that can continue on. So that work is happening, and I just wanted to give that reassurance.
Thank you. Genevieve, followed by Sarah. Oh, yes.
I've got two quick ones. First of all, the trajectory looking forward just a little bit with regards to incident response and compliance. Do you see any emerging issues going forward from this point with our new focus, particularly with compliance, how we're changing things? And on that, I just look at also the cost recovery sort of model we've got with regards to compliance and enforcement. How's that working in the current situation and how we're changing things? are we meeting our goal to get a certain percentage recovery back from that, first of all?
I'll answer your second question first. We're going to end up under recovered for the year, and we're making an intentional decision around that. The challenge we have with the way we recover our revenue via direct charging is that it drives us to very transactional one-to-one monitoring of consents, which is required, does serve a purpose, but it doesn't allow us to get truly risk-based and risk-focused. It doesn't allow us to step back and consider how we use partners, industry, start to think about collaborative implementation, which I think is where Councillor McKenzie was starting to go with this question, and get one to many. So create large effects out there in the real world with the minimal resources we've got. At the moment, we're very transactional. So we are trying to balance recovery of revenue, which means we have to monitor consents, with actually trying to make big change out there, which means we need to step back from individual consents and work at a higher level, which we can't charge for or find very difficult to charge for. We are looking at a new way of recovering user pays. So user pays, I think, as a principle is very good, and we should stick to it. How we recover that revenue, I think we will end up where we will come to is likely to be a mix of direct charging and an annual consent type charge. But that would allow us far more flexibility to reuse our resources much more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, I know you're not going to know percentages or money. I don't mean that, but do you have a gauge of the ratio change that might look like? I think we were looking at like 60 something percent, 30% or something before that we were hopeful for. But what could that look like if we don't sort of tighten our belts?
I would be guessing right now. We're still in the middle of doing the work. I didn't take that on notice. I'm not sure where we've got to. I may have an answer, but I'd have to go away and come back.
Well, that was tack on. Incident responses for pollutions, the likes coastal stuff. Has, I guess, any emerging trends going forward that we might be looking at?
Sorry, is that specifically in coastal area?
No, mostly incidents, but I just guess that there's not much oversight over coastal issues, but there are tools we have that we could look at doing some things. And I guess I think it's really, I'm not questioning the service at all, but I guess emerging trends going forward, because things are becoming more frequent than they used to. And yeah, I just wonder if there's anything emerging that could be in another report one day. It doesn't have to be right now, but.
I think firstly, incidents come through us in many different ways, through the maritime, through biosecurity, through the RMA. So we're talking about a very wide suite of things that are occurring. I'm not sure we've done any trend analysis, but we could definitely do that. But I think what we can say is we are seeing weather-related issues on the increase, and that affects everything. It's affecting our coasts, it's affecting our wastewater systems, so in that sense, I think we could say there will be trends there. I'm not sure we've done the analysis, Jen.
No, just thinking whether we can finish.
It all links back to, just a level of risk. So incident response is really interesting because it's directly what's impacting on people. So the vast majority of incident response is dust, odor, smoke. It's the stuff that's really bothering the community. The reports such as a discharge to water or there's dead fish are relatively lower because they're it requires a person to take the effort to report it, where a nuisance is really bothering them. And so it's just higher volumes. But that's all reactive. So probably to Nick's point, to Councillor Moody, point is what we want to do is do the proactive stuff. And so, all the compliance monitoring based on risk, that's where we need to identify where we need to focus to prevent those incidents in the future. Incident response, to a large extent, is those nuisance issues for our community.
Perhaps the last thing I might say on that is we are good at responding to critical incidents, so we respond well. Where we struggle a little bit is the more chronic dust, odour, and I have an ambition for us to be far more positive and direct around how we do that. We do get caught between the law, but I think we have opportunities to get far more direct and positive about how we address those. My view is we do not do our communities a good service in that space at the moment, and we need to get much better.
Thank you. One last question, and we will have 3 minutes to ask it and answer it. We will break at 12:30 and come back at 5 to 1. We still have an hour or so of work to do. The hazard and risk one plus the PX paper, and we have briefings starting at 2. So quick question, we break at 1:30, come back.
I actually had 3. So
3 minutes.
I had 3 questions. The one is about the sector leadership group, and the other one was just a quick comment about the term customer or client. I think we should be using regulatory party, perhaps, because I wouldn't think of them as customers. And being a regulator, I think it's a different role. And also, I would like to talk about biodiversity as far as we're very concentrated in the Banks Peninsula area, and whether we could be just wanting to explore what we're doing across the region, especially in the high country with tussock grassland, who are iconic merino country that's, in our calendars that we all admire. So the first question is about the sector leadership group and how we are interacting. And I'm really, really looking forward to when we do actually have that opportunity to talk to that group. But it's sort of like it's around transparency, because when it comes to my constituents, they would want to know that it is transparent about what's been discussed. We're not doing it behind closed doors. And also who are we workshopping with? And it's sort of like, so that's something to think about. And so those my 3 questions. Thanks.
Yep. Jeff?
I can just quickly answer that first question. You're talking about the one that was set up around in response to nitrates in drinking water. Yeah, so that was a chief executive forum that Stephanie called some chief executives in from within the rural sector initially. And so we are just sharing with them, and your briefing this afternoon will be telling you exactly what we are sharing with them tomorrow as the next step. And the idea around that was to share the problem, share the solution in terms of what do we know, what do they know, and how can we work together to find some solution. So we can certainly keep councillors informed with what we're doing, but this afternoon we will share with you ahead of sharing with them the next steps on the action plan.
I think as a general comment, I have observed us do collaborative planning, and it was challenging, but incredibly rewarding for communities and this organisation and the connections that were made. I have an ambition for us to do collaborative implementation, and I don't think we have stepped into that space post-planning. That's where I think we need to be. We're working on it. We need to set up the forums, but that is where we talk about We've got this planning framework. How are we collaboratively going to make it work? We are a player in that mix, and there are many others. And if we don't sit around a table and do it together, we won't keep connected. And there are challenges again. It will be a very challenging place, but that is where our rewards will come from. And I think it will also deliver the transparency that's being asked for as well.
Thank you, everyone. We will take a break now and come back at 5 to 1. We are pushing the day. What I have taken so far is that we probably need some briefings on the core services, probably being very short on the briefings and long on the question and answers. It's like we haven't been in this building for 2 months. There are a plethora of questions and things sitting there. So I think if we can find time, Mr. Chairman, to bring some of these conversations in, I suspect we could spend hours on these conversations a day like today. Thank you. So break and see you back in 25 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone who is here and some that aren't. Next session is community preparedness response to hazards. Invite Councillor Mackenzie to give us a preamble. And Lee, if you'd like to come to the table, or team.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I note this is the Community Preparedness and Response to Hazards Core Service, and it's the one that seems to feature in all of our chairs' submissions on local government reform. And so it's clearly the most, it might be the last, but it is the most important. I'd like to introduce our team. We have Brett Aldridge, who's the Director of Operations, Lee Griffith, who's the Manager for Community Preparedness and Response to Hazards, and Jessie, who is Senior Strategy Manager. There is a report which has been tabled. I just want to make a few comments which sometimes aligns with that report. The flood and this service supports community to be prepared for and able to respond to natural and human-induced hazards and events. A fair bit of the work is tied up in flood and river resilience. And that is about increasing our resilience to reduce environmental and economic impact of flooding events. And I have included environmental because if you think about significant land erosion events, as we've just had on the Banks Peninsula, where that flood load is going into a lake or an estuary or a harbour, it actually can create a significant environmental impact. And it's about improving protection of assets and social connectivity. And then in that area, I think about those people who may get cut off by floodwaters, who maybe have aspirations to deliver a baby in the comfort of a hospital rather than the back of their husband's ute. And I'd also reflect on the effect this work has in terms of its importance on reducing the cost of private insurance for private and public assets because of the protection we give them. And when we were debating including Hampstead, which is a suburb of Ashburton, into the targeted rating district for the Ashburton River, an $8 targeted rate for the residents of Hampstead saved them, I think I was told, something on average of $250 off their insurance bill for their houses. So there's direct benefit, which we want to talk about. We're also lining up that level of protection with the discussion around Beyond the Deluge, which is trying to move to a 1 in 200 year level of protection, and that lines up with the regional infrastructure funds and the money we get, which is reported on. And all that is done, just to placate everybody, within the parameters of our Braided River revival strategy. So we're not pushing river flood protection at the cost of the natural effect on our rivers. So that needs to be reflected on. Another important part of our work is civil defence, and John Sunkel leads that on our behalf and has been writing letters to the Minister accordingly, and our Harbour Master and Hazards Advice. And I just wanted to note that the Harbour Master's advice role is to protect the marine environment and ensure navigational safety. But when it comes to actually dealing with wrecks in particular, his powers are more coercive than absolute. So he has no ability to demand anything that is to be done. It is his role to try to coerce the parties, which is usually the boat owner and the insurance companies, to be responsible. And if he does that job right, which and I have full faith in our Harbour Master in doing that job right, it saves the liability being passed on to the ratepayers to clean up any messes. And that's particularly pertinent, as I gather there are a couple of boats have sunk in Littleton Harbour as a result, and I imagine there may be 1 or 2 wrecks in Akaroa Harbour as a result of the storm. the other role we have is managing the land endowed to the council around some of our rivers, but in particular the Waimak River and the Raka River, which was endowed to help fund river management, and that is a core part of the service. We've set up a working group, which I tap people on the shoulder based on geography, and I thought their expertise and their interests, and we have managed to meet once, I think, this year, which was a useful exercise, and we hope to meet on a frequent basis to make sure that whole core group is up to date with some of the issues and can bring other stuff to the table. I just want to make a note that it's not an exclusive group, and that where councillors have got issues they would like to reflect on, which is to do with this core service, that they'll be welcome to have pertinent input into that session. I'll leave Lee to talk through the specifics of the deliverables, but I just want to reflect on current or emerging issues. Clearly, we're and Lee will talk about Tranche 3, Tranche 1, Tranche 2, Tranche 3, and the RIF. But the ongoing issue is, and Megan reported to me just before that we've been arguing that we want a permanent line within government expenditure to help fund capital works for flood infrastructure, and Megan told me that in fact that it isn't included in the government's new infrastructure strategy. So that's an exciting development. Councillor Scott was raised the issue, which was raised in the Christchurch press, about insurance companies pulling out of insuring properties because of their concern about flood risk and various other risks. That's an issue we are working on. I think the main emerging issue really is, and I think it probably sits with the strategy committee that Nettles and Megan are working on, is developing a future plan for how this core service can be, the importance of this core service and how it can be transferred to whatever new entity local government reform might land us with. And so that's how we package the core service. And I think it's also about developing more coherent catchment plans for our high priority catchments and districts. I hand over to Lee, Jesse and Brett, but welcome any questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, we're happy to respond to questions about the content.
Genevieve, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. And I also acknowledge Councillor Mackenzie's comments and the ability of doing what we do, and I appreciate your work over the past few weeks. I just want to say that. Looking forward, however, and knowing the outcome sought as well with regards to capacity and outcomes, we hope to decrease the number of navigational safety incidents in the region, and in my mind that would be looking at our navigational safety planning and bylaws. So I had hoped to see a little bit, just looking forward, even just a commentary about emerging risks and looking in retrospect at the past quarter and knowing what we know now. And I know it doesn't reflect that in this report clearly because of different timing, but I would be hopeful that the dialogue would begin on how we can actually achieve these better outcomes through some simple measures by changing perhaps bylaws and things like that. I guess my question to you would be, have you seen anything that has jumped out at you as a potential risk going forward in this space for hazards in general? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In taking on board your feedback, there probably are a few things happening, particularly in narrow navigation safety and the harbour master space that we could include in the next report. And looking forward, our staff are on a national working group with Maritime New Zealand looking at co-regulation, and issues such as bylaws and various other things are coming up through that forum. So I'm not sure how public all that information is, but we can certainly provide some commentary on it, because I think some of the things that I understand being raised in that space, councillors would certainly be very interested in. I guess my reflection over the last few weeks, and with 3 more boats wrecked yesterday, is probably around if we had a second major event to respond to. So reflecting on the national capacity, the harbour master in Maritime NZ world in New Zealand is small, so it is almost like a small national team, and I'm going to investigate more the national response ability. I know our harbour master has talked about vessels available in New Zealand to support response, and how we might be able to tactically as a nation use the Navy differently. So I think there are some strategic items to think about going forward. Probably not ready to talk about them in detail today, but just signalling we are having those thoughts, and happy to have a conversation about it.
Megan.
I'm just going to touch back on what Councillor Mackenzie said about the National Infrastructure Strategy Te Waihanga. And I know it was just announced yesterday, but what I'm trying to get a gauge on is, now that flood risk infrastructure is actually identified as one of those top 10 priorities for the next decade, is that a significant shift or a material shift in national recognition of flooding infrastructure that therefore would lead to more funding opportunities moving forward, or am I overstating the opportunity? Oh, and also, sorry, and combined to that, it's not just the National Infrastructure Strategy, it's also the NPS infrastructure that actually recognise flood protection infrastructure as additional infrastructure. So I've combined the two. That might be giving me rose-tinted glasses.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll certainly wear those glasses too. It is probably the first time in recent history that we've seen flood protection recognised in a national instrument and in a national infrastructure plan. My understanding is currently the national infrastructure plan doesn't come with any money, but we obviously are engaged with central government, who have asked us for further projects for consideration into the future for co-investment. So we are hoping that those two roads merge. It's sort of laid the groundwork for it. I guess there is a question on what happens to all this through the reforms that we are in. Regional councils have our tranche 3 with ministers at the moment for one-off projects. We have a draft permanent business case due by the end of March, in about 6 weeks, that will support the conversation around permanent co-investment going forward. So yeah, they're currently running in separate lanes, but I'm hoping that's not deliberate and they're going to converge.
And if I can just make a comment, it is pleasing to see it in that infrastructure space. So finally making the list, it's well down the batting order, and I suspect getting money out of it might be difficult, but the fact that it has been identified in this case is really pleasing. We and others have made strong submissions on the Emergency Management Bill, Schedule 3, saying that rivers infrastructure, telemetry, stop banks, the like, should be set in that Schedule 3 as part of the essential infrastructure. It's a conversation that we began with DIA a number of years ago. So pleased to see where it sits, but again, I think the majority of regions that have rivers are making those same representations about where it should sit within the Emergency Management Bill. So if it becomes part of that essential infrastructure, then there will be a responsibility. Whether government comes to the party or not is the question, but at least getting it recognised as a start. Next is John Faulkner.
Thank you, Lee. One of the things that I've really been appreciating over the time is Councillor Mackenzie guiding me into the river system and what happens there. And as I learn more about it and I look at the protection work, the value of the protection work, the value of the assets that it's protecting, as a business person, I just say these are severely undervalued. So, we got beyond the deluge, the essential infrastructure issues, they're all floating around. And my question is the working group looking at making a submission or pushing a direction that there should be a higher valuation attributed to this infrastructure because of the level of protection it provides to the assets? And my mind says yes, it's a no-brainer. Now that would be a major piece of work, but the government is sort of indicating that the value of these assets are being recognised. If the regional restructure proceeds as we see, an increased value of these assets would be good on somebody's balance sheet and from a credit rating perspective as well. So are we heading in that direction at all?
Psychological trauma. You are right.
Has this meeting given you something?
As we were, I can't remember where we were.
Sorry.
Oh, it was your question. Yes. What was it again? Don't repeat it. Mm.
Oh, yeah, that's what it heard.
Yes, we've got the question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, agree that flood protection assets and their value in New Zealand isn't well understood. We daylighted it in about 2018 with a report called Hiding in Plain Sight, and we have had slow traction since then. So to see it recognised nationally now does highlight how many billions of dollars worth of assets are sitting behind our flood banks. In terms of what happens in the reforms, there are a number of ways this could go, and I will need to refresh myself on what this council's specific submission is. But there are some risks if it does get tangled up with things like Three Waters, and that it might get a little bit lost. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I'm happy to add to it if I haven't quite got there.
Ian.
Can I just very briefly add to the answer that because John and I talked about this earlier this morning. When we've got, I think, the Beyond the Deluge document, which John may not have seen yet, identified that I think we've got over half the rivers half the river protection schemes in New Zealand, in Canterbury alone, and over half the assets that are protected by river schemes that are protected in Canterbury alone. So the fact that Lee is leading a whole lot of this work at a national level is a credit to Lee, but it also reflects the importance of flood protection and the assets protected to this region. Yep. And if I could just, one other thing I meant to say when was the other role that we have is warning about floods. The Chair Swiggs brought it up this morning about the telemetry system and the flood warning system. And what has clearly been identified, not only in Hawke's Bay, but here in 21 and in North Canterbury and various other emergencies we've had, is that we're trying to develop a belts and braces approach, but we've also got baling twine holding our trousers up. And unfortunately, we keep reverting back to only having baling twine between us and disaster. And so the project that Lee again is leading, and which came out of the Tranche 2 funding, is really critical to try to upgrade the system and get the various parties, whether it's the telecom towers and those networks, to actually be able to give us the resilience we need to be able to continue us to report on the dangers we're facing.
Thank you, Ian. Dion, followed by Peter.
Can I just make one comment on it'll alleviate a couple of the questions. At that national level, Darren Ponter and myself are working quite in tandem to make sure that we can get the budgets, the government to put this flood stuff on the budget. So it's very helpful with the infrastructure space. And right early on, when we were doing with the Infrastructure Commission, we were having conversations with them about making sure that flood resilience was in that as recognised as a infrastructure, because at the start of the conversations it was not. So it's really come a long way, and there's a lot of work that staff and politicians are doing at the regional space to really get that highlighted. Now the next step is to get that into permanent line items in the budget, so it's not coming out of one-off funding from one part of the one part of the government, which at the moment is Kānoa. So we need to be making sure, and that's the advocacy piece that we should be thinking about in the future, making sure that whenever we talk to ministers and MPs and whatnot, ask them budget line flood resilience.
Thank you, Dion. Peter.
Yeah, I agree with all of what's been said, and I think it'll be a good effort if we can maintain that budget line. But as we know, in terms of digging into the asset management across the country, we just got our head, if you like the pun, above water, and we haven't really got immediate sources of capital. And what I would like to do, I'd like to see, is, and we know that how we can do this, the secondary flow paths need to be investigated, and that means a lot of capital to buy land to do that. There is some return on that land, but if it's high value land, then it's a lot of money. But I think, and I've said this to you, Chair, and I've also mentioned to Ian McKenzie, but we need to start talking seriously to the government about capital. We need to talk to them seriously about the idea we brought Nick and I brought here about Wanding Pines, a subsidiary loan effect. I mean, local government funding into local government, whatever, is the surest form of funding you can get in the country. Huge low risk because it's rated back for repayment. So those conversations that need to happen, which are probably 50, 60-year conversations, about how we get on top of that and how we use balance sheets that have got the ability to do that, to spread the risk and spread the loan. Because the sooner that we can have that conversation, then the sooner we can actually get on and do these things. All the conversations we've had, and we can talk about the need to do a whole lot of things, but this is people's lives we're talking about here. This is people dying because of this. People driving off into bridges where bridges have been washed out. I mean, that fellow up in the North Island did that. So we've got that same stuff in our future if we don't actually pay attention. Wilding Pines can wait. I mean, we can green the Mackenzie. I don't really care about that, actually, in front of fixing the rivers. They're both important, but people's lives are more important than trees.
Thank you, Peter. Last question from Sarah before we move on.
Okay, but I'll be a little bit radical. Spatial planning, 50 years out, I'm hoping that we'll have some common sense in our land use and how we plan our rivers and catchments, and with things like flow paths and grade planes, and that we actually have land use that can be flooded and still can be productive, but can be flooded. So it's just really, we need to transition into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian,
just one concluding comment, if I may, and it goes to Dion and Peter's comments and supports the work that Lee is doing, and that is that if we are to have a coherent argument to take to central government, we actually do need those catchment plans as to how we argue, as to what we're going to do in any particular catchment. So if you take the Orari as an example, what is the plan should we have the capital available to give that resilience to the thing? And so we have ongoing work we can do here in preparing our case so that when it goes to central government, we're not just getting piecemeal funding for specific projects. We actually have a coherent plan to which we're working to.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Lee and team. Appreciate that, and I appreciate that we have moved through this service in reasonable time. We have a motion to receive the quarterly core services report. Could I have someone to move? Thank you, Genevieve. Seconder, Nick Ward. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Any further conversation? I know we did want to talk about future-y things. I think we've done a fair bunch of that along the way, but any pertinent points you might wish to raise in the next literal 3 or 4 minutes before we move on. Ashley and Peter Scott.
So I've actually put this in an email to everyone, but I'm just very aware, listening around the table, that we're all talking about saving money, adding to reserves, which may be a totally valuable and right use of money. But I think that it's really important that we get an analysis of whether spending that money somewhere may save us more money in the future, or may achieve something that we kept putting off because we haven't had the money, but we really need to do. And so I just urge everybody in the room, yes, it's really good to keep rates low. No argument from me there. But there's low and there's low. And we really should be thinking, as we're coming up to our annual plan, with these underspends, is it the best use to put it into reserves, or is there something really important that we've kept putting off that we could do with this money that would make a tangible difference? And I'd actually like to see some analysis of reserves versus spending.
Yeah, we can bring that back in the annual plan debate. Thank you. Peter and Sarah.
Just really quickly, I think Ian McKenzie made a point about working groups, and I'd just like us to have a further discussion somewhere along the line about that.
You, Sarah?
I was following up on that too. I think, working groups.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Nettles, followed by...
I've asked for that working groups thing to come, so we're going to have that.
Okay. Nettles.
Just concurring and echoing Peter's comments on utilising the headroom in our lazy balance sheet and putting that ability to fund a lot of the really important flood work is something I'd like us to do some more work on.
Thank you. I got things a bit back to front. We've already received the report and then had the conversation, but we are good. Did you have a final question, Nick? Because we do have plenty of business.
Just to agree, working groups, good. I don't want to just be the guy calling out things from the cheap seats.
Megan.
I want to be part of the solution.
Okay, are we up to... Sorry, I'm just double checking we're up to the chair's report now.
No, we were just finishing off
The last one. That's fine.
That's fine. Okay. So we've moved and seconded and said yes to receiving the report. If we move then to 7.2, Regional Delivery Committee Resolution Status Report. Taflin, anything to note?
This will be very quick. Thank you, Chair. We've just got one here, but I just wanted to echo what Councillor Claire Mackay said earlier in ERP. With these are resolutions regarding dust and air quality. We do have two on the S&P committee as well outstanding. So what staff will be doing is bringing those back together for a single conversation with Council so that we can work through those. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? None. Then could I have someone please move?
Can I just ask on that dust thing, does that mean that we'll have some actions? I'm just worried that we'll keep bringing information back and bringing information back. But will there be some concrete actions so that we can take that back out to that community and say, this is what we're up to?
Yep.
Through you, Chair. Yes, and just on task point, we are bringing them together, but I can talk to the particular two resolutions in this one. We've got a request for quotations out at the moment for the guidance, and those are due early March, and then we're looking to have that work complete by the end of this financial year. But we're also doing work around the community engagement across both of the resolutions, including the monitoring work that we talked about last week at the Strategy and Policy Committee. And so we're putting a plan in place for that as well, and that will be happening sooner than the end of this financial year. That's occurring over the next month or two.
Thank you. Sarah.
This is to do with quarries as well. Can I talk about the? I would like to see if I went out to the quarry with Fulton Hogan and had a great day, and just wondering, after that, I thought, well, could we suggest that they hold a open day for the local community? Is that something that I can suggest to the all right, okay. Oh, I'm out of place? Right.
We can bring that. Yeah. Genevieve.
Just to reiterate, the targeted changes, I really thought it might be reflected still on here as a thing in progress to the coastal plan. I just don't want it forgotten. And when it slips off, then I'll know something's wrong. But until then, I would still like to see the progress of the technical information coming in to be part of the whole forward focus, because it is. So could I have a note of that, please?
You would request a note, continuation of, yes. Okay, thanks, we will note that. Could I have someone then please move that we note the status report, previous resolutions? Thank you. Andrea, seconded by Dion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. To the chairman's Kōrero, I'm not going to say lots and lots. I think we've had a pretty good conversation along the way. Megan does have a point. Literally, if we could spend less than 5 minutes, and then we need to move to our public excluded for the presentation. So, Megan, do you have an issue?
I've got a lack of information about what is meant by non-regulatory environmental levers. So I understand the regulatory framework really well, but then a number of councillors are talking about what are the non-regulatory actions we could be taking, and I'm a bit lost in what that actually means. And it might be for later.
Later, we'll bring something back for that conversation.
Great. Okay, yes. Thank you.
Any other points of burning interest? None.
More than happy to talk to Megan about that. I mean, it's something that I've spoken about a lot. So is Nick, actually.
Cool. We will just note that we have had a conversation. That's all we do. That would then be the close of the ordinary meeting. Could I have someone please... I was just noting it. Well, you want to move her in a second?
Yeah, yes,
even
please.
for noting.
Yes, please.
All right, Peter Scott moved it and John Faulkner seconded it. All those in favour of noting 3 words, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Are we good? Happy? One take. Excellent. Well, we'll now declare the public meeting closed and ask that someone move that we move into Peter Scott and Nick Ward, that we move into Public Excluded. We shall wait a moment or two for the technology to catch up with us.
Caught back up.
And we should have caught back up. The last piece of business then is to say thank you for your participation in this meeting. Our next meeting will be held on the Wednesday, the 13th of May. We now move to presentations and briefings. So if you want to stretch your legs for 30 seconds, we will move into the next one in a couple of minutes. Thank you.